What's up, everybody? This is Vincent Tseng, the Wandering Warrior, and today I want to tackle a topic that I think is so important for our understanding of what are the traditional Chinese martial arts, how to look at them, and how we can take that understanding of traditional Chinese boxing and apply that today. The mainstream perspective is, in my opinion, very warped. Chinese martial arts are at once seen as like this unified category, right? And then also seen as all these hundreds of specialized systems and styles with unique stuff going on. And both of these assumptions or views are flawed. China did not have one single monolithic culture. It didn't, still doesn't. And therefore, it doesn't have one single monolithic approach to martial arts. These cultures all came up with varieties of ways of dealing with violence. Are they interconnected via the legacy of the Han civilization and all the conquests and dynasties thereafter? Absolutely. Are they one monolithic, unified whole? No way. The truth is diverse. Yet within this diversity, there are what we must recognize as almost regional languages of fighting, these approaches to athletics and movement and combat. These different regions, systems do usually share techniques and principles. That is to say, many regions have this overarching sort of common language or common vernacular of combat. So what is vernacular? Vernacular in English is a noun, and it means the language or dialect that's spoken by the ordinary people in a particular country or region, right? So the imperial military back in the day, whether it's the Ming dynasty or the Qing dynasty, might practice a certain way that is a little bit more standardized, although it was never fully standardized. But there's some regulations and standardization. But on the folk level, civilians are learning to fight in a particular fashion, some of which trickles up to the military, some of it is the military stuff trickling down. There's influences all kinds of ways. But the folk stuff, the vernacular, this is what we're talking about. Most of the Chinese boxing systems are mixed martial arts. They combine different training methods and tactics to employ the classic ti, da, shuai, na, right? The sort of four elements or categories of skills of most Chinese boxing styles. So throughout northern China, at the end of the Qing dynasty, we see a variety of highly popular systems that in the modern day are under the umbrella term or that regional flavor of Cháng, long boxing or long fist. These styles include ones like Hong Quan, red boxing, Shaolin Quan, Shaolin boxing, Pao Quan, cannon boxing, and Mei Hua Quan, plum flower boxing. Remember that one. All of them share something of a common vernacular or a common language. Matter of fact, the term long fist or Cháng might actually have been a 1900s convention where Wushu Institute and the Jingwu Athletic Association were kind of lumping a lot of these northern styles and systems together based on shared attributes and shared techniques and tactics and calling them Cháng. The name, I think, actually might descend from the old style Taizu Cháng, great ancestor emperor's long boxing or long fist. Right? That's quite an old style. But many of these Yellow River Plain systems and styles of civilian fighting kind of incorporate very similar elements. That said, although it might actually be a 1900s terminology or nomenclature that was invented, I think it's quite apt. Like I said, they share so much stuff, they might as well be a sort of common language of combat from northern China. Now remember when I said remember plum flower boxing, Mei Hua Quan? We're about to dive into that. The plum flower is a powerful motif in the traditional Chinese art and culture. See, it's one of the few plants that it's one of the few flowers that will blossom in the early spring when there's still snow. So symbolically, it's kind of a motif signifying resilience. Early spring was also a time when peasants were not yet hard at work, and so they had a little more time for leisure, such as watching martial arts fights and demonstrations at the marketplaces. A collection of folk boxing styles, known as Meihua Quan Plum Flower Boxing, arose in North China. It began in the 1800s, and by the time the Qing dynasty had ended in the early 1900s, it had many thousands of followers. It was quite popular. In fact, many styles and systems which were not originally part of this plum flower boxing movement took on the name plum flower boxing, and they were easily able to assimilate the branding and the signature techniques and so on. And this popular martial arts movement had strong connections to the local folk religion as well as millenarianism, which is such an interesting human phenomenon. Millenarianism is a seductive and psychologically empowering mentality that a lot of places adopt during a time of societal collapse. There's elements of this we see in Taiwan during the Tapani uprising. We see this in the Philippines with the Pulahanes. We see this in Native America with some of the desperate uprisings against the white settlers. So this movement spread throughout to Jiangsu, Anhui, Henan, Hebei, and Shandong provinces before the Boxer Rebellion of 1899, which it was a major part of. Okay, so that's, it shows how rapidly a martial arts movement could spread and, incorporate so many different styles and systems under its umbrella. But part of that is also because of shared culture, as well as a sort of shared martial arts language of movement, of approach, of tactics. So it was very easy for all of these systems and styles that were already interrelated to kind of band together under one movement. In fact, the Plum Flower Boxing Group, it still exists in China today as kind of a local protection organization and as a martial arts training group. Now, today, many martial arts coming from those regions share similarities in how their taolu, or sequences, forms, kata, war dances, if you will, are performed, and they seem to share many techniques. Now, imagine that you grow up within the context. I know today we're kind of removed from it all. Even most Chinese people don't live the way they did in the Qing dynasty, but imagine you are within the context, right? You understand the meta. Why? While there might be variations on techniques and different trade secrets from different individuals, their masters, their schools, whatever, it's likely that generally everybody knew a lot of the same moves. Even if you're not a seasoned fighter, if you've grown up seeing fighting, you've probably watched marketplace demonstrations. You've probably seen brawls on the streets, in the fields. You've probably seen Lei Tai fights. Remember, they used to prove themselves in duels on raised platforms, right? Don't tell me that there wasn't a dueling culture in China, okay? And you might have even seen small battles and skirmishes, maybe even seen some big battles and wars. And at the very least, you've probably seen people outside training. And you might have actually seen some good stuff if they weren't being overly closed door about their training. So when you were looking at somebody performing their taolu, their war dance, their form, their sequence, whether this is at a marketplace or at a temple celebration, you probably already knew a lot of the moves. This is no different to how today a lot of people know jab, cross, knee, roundhouse kick, double leg takedown, right? They're not necessarily good at it, but because they watch MMA, they watch UFC, Bellator, 1FC, they know this stuff. That has this sort of mainstream baseline level MMA is kind of what everyone knows. It's the meta, it's the fighting movement language, right? Same in the Qing dynasty. All of those aforementioned systems, Hong Quan, red boxing, Shaolin Quan, Shaolin boxing, Pao Quan, cannon boxing, as well as sets such as Lian Bu Quan, continuous steps boxing, Gong Li Quan, power building fist, and Tan Tui, whether that's spelled like the Long Tan, Tan Tui, or the springing legs, Tan Tui. Either way, these all seem to fall within the common vernacular of Cháng or long fist, long boxing. Those last three were actually popularized within the Jingwu Athletic Association that was started in Shanghai, founded by the famous Ho Yuanjia, this sort of Chinese martial arts hero figure that emerged during that time. And the Jingwu Athletic Association sought to create a structured training environment to save the Chinese martial arts from extinction and to disseminate amongst the people in a way that would promote health, martial order, and patriotism. This was, after all, a very ethno-nationalistic time for the Han Chinese people. And this idea of openly disseminating the Chinese martial arts, it kind of stands in contrast to the sort of secretive, closed-door, guild and trade secret mentality that most traditional Chinese martial arts came from. So it was kind of revolutionary for its time. Now, even though it was very forms-focused and a heavy calisthenics and nationalism sort of indoctrination approach, I think in many ways it was a good attempt. Even if it wasn't a good attempt, it was an early and influential attempt at openly disseminating this stuff, combining best practices and top coaches within this shared martial arts common language or common vernacular. And its legacy lives on today. Interestingly, tan tui, right? Pawn legs or springing legs, depending on how you write it. Tan tui comes from the Hui Chinese community. These are Chinese Muslims that had some kind of Central Asian or Iranian origins way back in the day. Nowadays, they're more intermixed with Chinese blood than not, but they kind of still have their own thing. Back then, they were still very much their own distinct community, and they had their own approach to the Chinese martial arts, and you could even consider it kind of their own dialect within the broader Chinese common vernacular of northern China. And again, a lot of that northern Chinese common language is what we now call long fist or long boxing. Now, I don't want to completely throw out Chinese social conventions. Yes, respect was paid to one's teachers, and often your first teacher got a lot of the credit for your fighting skills. This was sort of the humility and the norm for many Chinese martial artists. That is definitely a part of this. That loyalty to your teacher is definitely a part of this. However, there was a lot of exchanging. There was a lot of learning from one another. A perfect example of that blending of skills and exchange and the creation of new sub-styles is actually from my own background, praying mantis boxing, Tang Lang Chun. So, Tang Lang Chun, or praying mantis boxing for short, it comes from Shandong province in the Qing dynasty. Now, Qing dynasty Shandong was quite interesting. It had a lot of these coastal port cities, so there was a booming trade, but in the hinterlands, in the hills, there was a lot of poor farming villages. So the result is that it had a culture of adventurous and proud fighters. They were willing to fight for a place in the world. Whether they were guards along the Grand Canal, or they were bodyguards or caravan escorts, biaoju, or they were working as bandits, preying upon travelers, be that on the roads or along the Grand Canal and rivers, jianghu, or perhaps even pioneering and colonizing Manchuria. These were tough dudes willing to confront and fight for a chance at a better life. These were intrepid, bold, and direct people. Now, Mantis Boxing's origins are partially shrouded in myth. There might be some late Ming Dynasty stuff. There may be some resistance to the Qing Dynasty. There might have been some Mongols serving within the Ming military that got stationed there. That is all research that is being done. I can't speak to it in any detail. There were many systems that emphasized some kind of striking into clinch fighting, but they didn't necessarily call themselves Mantis Boxing. In Shandong province, there emerged this particular style, Mei Hua Tang Lang Chun, plum flower, praying mantis boxing. And the practitioners of this system did very well for themselves in this burgeoning industry of caravan escorts, caravan guards, called biaoju. At the core of this praying mantis boxing system was the Liang clan. And the Liangs ran a very successful Biaoju caravan escort company, like I said. And you may have noticed Meihua, plum flower. That plum flower in the beginning of the name is no mistake. They were linked to the broader movement that was going on, and many of their guys ended up in the Boxer Rebellion. So there's a link there, no doubt about it. It is said that an early practitioner of what later became Mantis Boxing fought and exchanged with a Liuhe Quan person, Liuhe's 6 harmonies boxing. So a boxer from that tradition, fought with this early Mantis boxer. They couldn't beat each other, and so they taught one another each other's skills. This gave rise to an early offshoot off of Mantis Boxing known as Liuhe Tanglang Quan, 6 harmonies Mantis Boxing. So again, if nobody cross-trained and nobody learned from one another, how the hell did this happen, right? And like I said earlier, the system that later became known as Meihua Tanglang Quan, Plum Flower Mantis Boxing, this is the one that ended up being deeply involved with the Biaoju, the caravan escort company that, at least in the time that we're talking about, was led by the clan leader Liang Xuexiang. Now, Liang Xuexiang was the boss of this company, and so his sons and his employees would pick up varying amounts of this Mantis boxing. And so later on, we see that not only is there this Meihua Tanglang Quan as well as this Liuhe Tanglang Quan, we're starting to see a whole lot of other variants pop up as their employees and sons kind of make their own way in the world. The evidence shows that they learn from one another and create their own systems. Otherwise, why would we have Taiji Tanglang Quan, Taiji Mantis Boxing, Taiji Meihua Tanglang Quan, Taiji Plum Flower Mantis Boxing, Qi Xing Tanglang Quan, 7-star Mantis Boxing, Ba Bu Tanglang Quan, 8-step Mantis Boxing, Guangban Tanglang Quan, shiny board Mantis Boxing, Cháng Tanglang Quan, long fist Mantis Boxing, Zhuai Shou Tanglang Quan, throwing hand Mantis Boxing, Mi Men Tanglang Quan, secret gate Mantis Boxing, and there's many more. So martial arts brothers, employees, and associates would learn skills from one another, combine it with their own pugilism, their own boxing background they already had, because remember, they had to qualify to be employed. They had to be good fighters already. They would then create these new systems under the Mantis Boxing branding, right? And these would contain similar core techniques and forms, taolu, but also they had their own ideas on how they like to fight and how they wanted to teach their students, so there were a lot of differences as well. But the overall formula, the overall approach, the overall language of fighting is quite similar. This mixing was done in a context of a common vernacular of fighting skills in a thriving socioeconomic situation for the martial arts. So the reality of the late Qing wushu, or martial arts, Quan Shu, boxing, it was one of brutal violence, but also frequent mixing and exchange and mobility. People were literally moving around quite a bit. This context has really inspired me to help reestablish some kind of sense of common language, common vernacular. Today, the traditional martial arts in general are declining, and some of them are definitely on the verge of extinction. Chinese boxing is sadly no exception. It might be doing a bit better than many folk fighting arts, but it is more or less in decline. Fine-tuned fight know-how is sorely lacking in a lot of these schools. Techniques are usually not being validated in pressure testing and in real-life sparring, or at least not realistic sparring scenarios. And there isn't really a thriving traditional martial culture in the Chinese sense anymore. And I know, there's hundreds of different styles and systems, and there's many different regional fighting languages, so to speak, but there are key concepts and principles that are shared within these regional fight languages, common languages of combat. And so I think one of the best ones to tackle would be Cháng, long fist, because it was so widespread and so popular throughout the late Qing dynasty, and it has influenced so many martial arts within China, as well as just so many martial arts within China fall under that umbrella. So I want to contribute to kind of rebooting that common vernacular, that sense of shared approach. And that requires people to know what that is. And to that end, I've created and will soon release an online course series that breaks down the bare essentials, the nuts and bolts, and the overall, just broadly speaking, the overall strategic doctrine and ways to train long fist type fighting movement. Now there are so many different systems. It's not meant to be some kind of exhaustive list of techniques. I'm not a walking encyclopedia. But my area of excellence, my area of genius, is being able to distill down the essentials of what makes a Cháng methodology of fighting, how to create that environment with you and your friends, your training partners, and how to effectively train it. I can do this stuff in sparring. I don't do boxing or Muay Thai or even modern Sanda. I do Quan Shu. I do Kun Tao. But I'm able to go toe-to-toe and spar with other people. Am I a world champion? No. But do I know how to train this stuff so that you can be effective in it? Hell yeah. And that's what I want to offer you guys. So guys, stay tuned. Look out for that stuff coming up. I'm making the site. I'm making the online courses. It's almost ready. This is going to be the first of many to come. And it's my way of giving back to the community that has given me so much. These are the rewards of my wandering. These are the fruits of my labor. And it's a way for me to build my martial arts career by empowering you guys with awesome training material. Thank you guys so much for following me on my journey. I salute yours. Peace.